When we look at contemporary instructional practice and what learning looks like in a 21st century classroom, Friesen tells us that full attention must be given to 5 principles. First, designing the inquiry study to ensure that students are learning their way into disciplinary ways of knowing, doing, and being. Next, we must understand fully what the student knows and understands, that is, where he or she is on their learning journey and what they, the teacher, needs to do to help the student make progress. We must ensure students have clear, explicit criteria to guide and direct their learning. Teachers need to provide many opportunities from many different sources for specific feedback and feed forward along the way. And finally, students should be provided with multiple flexible representations of concepts, enabling them to express their understandings and engage in multiple flexible ways. Take a second now to reflect on what are some of the contemporary instructional practices you have in your classroom. After each reflection question you see in this video, feel free to pause it and take the time to reflect on what your answer would be. Friesen talks about universal design for learning and the recognition that a one-size-fits-all curriculum is not a reality anymore. She goes on to list 4 points about the larger claims proponents of universal design for learning make. She begins with the idea that diversity in the classroom is the norm rather than a problem to be fixed. Next, she states that paying attention to what does and does not work for students generally relegated to the margins will improve learning for all. Also, teachers must recognize that all students can meet similar learning goals if curricula, instruction, and assessment are radically reconceptualized. And effective use of technology enables all students to represent, express, and engage with ideas in multiple ways not generally seen in conventional classrooms. Take a second again to reflect on how have you used technology in your classroom to allow students to represent their learning.
Friesen tells us that when we use a variety of digital media tools in our classroom, it allows all students to complete those difficult or impossible problems that only a few might be able to do with a pencil and paper. Teachers can use digital tools like spreadsheets, simulations, software such as dynamic geometry, programming, and interactive games to ensure that academic achievement is possible for all students. And when we begin to realize that disability can be conceived as a mismatch between the learner's needs and the education offered. In the end, Friesen believes that the ultimate education goals will no longer be about the mastery of content, but about the mastery of learning. Friesen states that universal design for learning calls for multiple means of representation to give learners various ways of acquiring information and knowledge, multiple means of expression to provide learners alternatives for demonstrating what they know, and multiple means of engagement to tap into learners' interests, offer appropriate challenges, and increase motivation. Here's another reflection for you. What are some of the different ways you allow students to represent, express, and engage in a lesson in your classroom?
Continuing with assessment for learning, technology allows a benefit for both the teachers and the student. For the teacher, Hattie says, it is the feedback to the teacher about what students can and cannot do that is more powerful than feedback to the student. With technology, teachers can get instant feedback on how well students are learning the lesson they just taught and can gauge from there whether they are ready for the next piece or if reteaching or reinforcement is needed. For the student, learning can be very similar to playing a video game. In a video game, you can't move on until you've mastered a concept. You can get instant feedback on what you've done right and on what you need to work on. Using technology in a classroom, students can get instant feedback on whether they've mastered a concept or if they need to go back and try again before they move on to the next level. Take a few minutes to reflect on the following questions. How can you efficiently and effectively use technology as a tool for assessment for learning in your classroom without allowing it to get in the way of learning? How do we ensure that technology does not become the sole learning target, but instead assists our teaching to help all students learn?
According to Lourenco, Goncalves, and Elias, the use of assistive technology in inclusive education, along with appropriate furniture, physical spaces, teaching aids, differentiated instruction and strategies, gives access and success to all students while leveling the playing field. Philo goes on to support this by saying, assistive technology represents a way to search for alternative routes for the construction of knowledge by people with disabilities. By using assistive technology in class, Lourenco, Goncalves, and Elias state that the main goal is to maximize the skills of each student by teaching and helping him or her to develop and use it as much and as quickly as he or she can. There needs to be a team approach, according to the literature, where skilled professionals work collaboratively with health, and classroom teachers to develop a program to ensure success for the individual student. Here's another reflection question for you to think about. How do we ensure that we are choosing the best available assistive technology when technology is changing at lightning speed?
Throughout the readings, it is a common theme that technology is essential to the success of each learner, regardless of their ability. Example being, using dynamic geometry in math class that helps all students to achieve at a higher level than if they had just used paper and pencil. The idea of the instant feedback for assessment for learning is another example of the value of access to technology. Yet, with the importance it plays, many teachers still struggle to get adequate access for their class.
It's time for another reflection question. How do we meet the challenge of access to technology when there is so much variation between schools within the same school district, school districts within a province, and from province to province?